Vlog, and today I'm with Amani Wells-Onyioha, partner and operations director at Solus Strategies.
Whole strategies.
Soul Strategies, got it.
Mhm.
Solus Strategies doesn't make any sense. And we are talking about organizing for change, particularly in areas not associated with progressive causes,
Mhm.
um, areas where talking like a leftist or progressive is going to be a liability, even if policies are supported in the area, that sort of thing. And so I wanted to ask you, before we really get going, what do you do at Soul Strategies?
Yes, so we are a campaign labor organization. So we kind of came to be because there's a lot of stuff going on in the political industry. There's a lot of consultants, but there wasn't a lot of people who were coming aboard and like actually doing the labor that'll get you through to election day. Throw in unionized labor that is like almost completely insignificant, like it didn't exist. So we wanted to unionize our team and then be able to provide campaign labor to different types of candidates all up and down the ballot and in all 50 states. So we work only with Democrats, and we work with progressive leaning Democrats for the most part. And yeah, we're kind of just give people access to a campaign team that they otherwise may not be able to afford, because we bring the price way down and you can get pretty much a whole unionized staff for a couple $1,000 a month, when that doesn't exist anywhere else, really.
So that's an issue that I know a little bit about, but not a lot. Why is campaign work generally not unionized?
That's a great question. I think there's a couple of factors. One, sometimes campaigns are short. So there might be people who join the campaign towards the end. There might be a lot of staff that comes in like 6 weeks, or it's a lot of people campaigning isn't like their full-time job. Like they kind of just hop from campaign to campaign to campaign. So it's kind of hard putting together a big enough team at one time that can unionize. I've seen it play out in some campaigns where people allow their staff to unionize while they're on the campaign, but doing the union negotiations, coming up with a bargaining agreement, doing all of that, you might get through all those steps and then the campaign is over maybe. Or in some instances where there's really long campaigns, you have union busting on campaigns. Like I remember this one campaign from 2021. It was a New York City council race, and it was a woman who was literally the front runner in the race. Like she had all the percentages. I think she had like 70 to 80% chance that she was going to win. And then her staff was unionizing, and then she tried to union bust and she lost that election. She ended up coming in third, all because she decided to union bust her campaign. So it's a good look for the campaign, for nothing else. If you don't even believe in union organizing, for nothing else, it's a good look to have a union campaign team, instead of, crushing the union while you're campaigning. So I feel like there's several factors, but the main one I would say perhaps is time, or people don't know what comes with unionizing. People might be scared of it. They might not want to have to pay union wages on the campaign trail. A lot of people rely heavily on like volunteers for their staff, so they would have to pay people in order to have them unionized. So I think there's a lot of like selfish reasons, but then there's also like fear, time, stuff like that.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So you operate in a lot of areas that are not traditionally considered progressive or democratic strongholds. And when we talked before about you coming on the show, that's actually what you did that interested me the most. Although talking also about working with a unionized staff, and this is actually quite important for what we do here.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the issues that you think any kind of left-wing political campaign is going to have in, say, purplish areas maybe of color, but are not traditionally associated with Democrats beyond, the city, etc. What issues do you see, and where do these candidates really fall down?
Controlling the narrative. I know the Republicans, the right has done a great job at like dictating what the political conversation surrounds. They've done a great job at capturing the audience and creating a story about what progressivism is. And you're already kind of coming in on the defense when you're running in areas like that, because people already have this made up idea of what you're all about, the agenda you're going to try to push on them or whatever the case may be. So knowing how to speak to the voter and not get caught up in just the culture wars or the narrative war of it all. And just being able to find the very specific region specific issue that your seat can actually legislate on is one of the most important ways that you can kind of get around that, because otherwise you'll be caught up in arguing about something that probably wasn't even part of your platform anyway, or probably isn't even something that you're even allowed to have any power over. For instance, you don't need to argue with them about Medicare for all when you're running for city council, because you can't vote on Medicare for all. So don't spend your time pushing messaging like that or defending that bill when it's not a bill that you can even vote on as in the seat that you're running.
So would you say that progressives and leftists in general have problems focusing on specific local issues as opposed to big national ones? I can think of some times where I've seen here in Salt Lake people running on like stances about the military for like city council, and I'm just like, I mean, that's an important stance, but I don't know what it has to do with what you would do.
Yeah.
Like,
100%.
do you see a lot of that? Yeah.
Yes, I see so much of that. That's why I'm laughing. Like 100%. Like and that's what kind of, we lose a lot of races ourselves, not because our ideas are bad, not because we've lost like the moral war about the issue. It's because we don't focus on the issue that's important to the voter. So for instance, let's talk about the education board races. All of those education board seats that these crazy right-wing people have filled is because they're talking about education in their schools. I don't want my kids reading them books. I don't want, this type of teacher in the classroom. Like, they're talking about things that their seat can actually legislate on, and they will pick 2 or 3 talking points and like hammer it into your head. Like, we know what CRT is. We know what the anti-woke agenda is, because we've heard all of these right-wingers, no matter what seat they're running on, find a way to make it apply. And that's something that the left struggles with. Like, if we want to be passionate about having an excessive budget, we don't have to talk about just the military, right? We can bring that issue down to a county level, because your local police station might have an excessive budget. So no, city councilman, you can't legislate on the military, but you might be able to say, hey, in this district, our police force got $10 billion last year to get some new tanks or something crazy could have happened. And you might be able to create an opinion around that. At the same time, you also have to be mindful of your district and who you're running to represent. Because if you're running to represent a very purple, or even sometimes we're flipping a district, a red district, then you have to be aware of what your constituents want from you. So that's another thing, because I feel like sometimes we want the constituents to want what we want, but at the same time, this is a democracy. So we have to legislate in a way that gets something achieved for them as well. I said a lot, but that's the gist.
One thing I think it's got to be somewhat challenging for someone doing what you're doing is that a lot of people who act in, say, political discourse are highly enmeshed usually, and like national issues, particular stances on any number of cultural issues, and also may have, even though they might be pretty far left wing, may have reasons to distrust, say, national level Democrats for whatever reason. How do you appeal to them?
Oh, that's an interesting question. How do we appeal to those folks? I feel like when we very first started trying to do this, we tried to appeal to anybody. Like, if you were a lefty we rock with you, like we here, and that was our strategy. But slowly but surely, we found out that that isn't a strategy that's gonna win races. So I think it's just about not even trying to appeal to everybody who's on the left, but appealing to people who are on the left, who have the grit and the determination to run this race, and who have what's the best way to explain it? Some humility about the race at the same time too, because I think that's something that I've found is like there's a lot of people who are running who are very stuck in their ways, and they are very passionate about issues, which is all well and good. Like no one's telling you you're not allowed to be passionate about this issue. At the same time, you have to think about your race. For instance, we were working with somebody in North Carolina, I think it was last year, and they wanted to make one of their biggest platform issues the war in Palestine, that conflict that's happening over there. The North Carolinians in your bread district know nothing about that. And us dedicating a page to your website to talk about this issue, or in their perspective, they basically just wanted to talk about how like we should be on Palestine's side, like, you know, their land is being taken, all of this, and kind of pushing the narrative like that. Shame on you for not defending Palestine. But it's like, you have to know your audience. Your people in the middle of nowhere in North Carolina, 9 times out of 10 are just not aware of this issue. Not that they're even on the wrong side of the issue, they're not aware of the issue. And when we talk at people that way, and when we assume their morality on an issue without even educating them on it first, it kind of, you've already lost. So just kind of getting people to understand that it's not just about pushing an agenda, it's about representing a group of people and making their lives better, making their lives materially better than it was before you got there to represent them. And that's what it's all about. That's what it should be about. And sometimes it's kind of hard getting people to like understand it that way.
What do you think that is? What do you think it is hard to get people? Because, you know, I come from an arguably more quote radical background, and I actually have some of the same frustrations. That's actually why I was interested in talking to you about this, because I'm also like, why are we framing these things in a way that requires someone to know specific issues, and of which, some of the issues, like, for example, you could argue that you could, not invest county funds into Israeli, purchasing or whatever, fine. But the abstract stance actually, even at some levels at the national level, often is not something you can immediately act off of.
Right.
So
yes.
What do you think? How do you convince people to reframe those things and be like, okay, we're not saying that this is not an important issue, but that you have to meet these other people's daily needs first and where they're at. And then you're going to have to introduce that issue in a way that they can understand and probably affects them, and that you can have some kind of action item on, right? Like, how do you do that?
And that's a great question. And sometimes I'm not able to. That's the best thing. Like, I have the same frustration as you. Because when I came into this world, I was super Bernie, progressive me down. Okay. Like all the issues, like I'm right here. But when I started working on the campaigns, I realized, and this is my critique of the left. My critique of the left is there is a lot of ego in the ideals. A lot of it isn't coming from the place to serve. It's coming from a place to feel better than morally than somebody else. And that's just the same. It's the same on the far ends. It's the same thing, because these Christian nationalists want us to believe that they got they are the most moral of us all, and all of us is going to hell because of what we believe. And then the left, the far left, is like, well, you're a piece of shit and you're a moral nothing if you don't agree with what I agree with. And again, we're losing the person in that district. These people, housing solutions there's no solutions. People are not able to afford meals. You know what I'm saying? Like in cities like Dallas, we have such a big homeless population, and there's no plans to build any new homeless shelters, or like we're losing everything in these narratives instead of actually bettering people's lives. And that's where it's some people where we just can't work with them because they're just not trying. You're not listening. Like, I get it. That's fucked up. We agree. However, what are you going to do to materially improve the lives of your constituents? What is that plan? And a lot of people that I talk to don't have a plan for that. They have a thing that they want to be passionate about. They have an issue that's like their buzzer issue, but it's very idealistic in a way. Like there's not a lot of strategy even.
Yeah, I could
Mhm.
definitely see that. One thing I might ask to like maybe pull apart is I've often witnessed that some of the pet issues of the
Mhm.
right, even if they don't have immediate positive effect or may even have negative effect
Mhm.
on people's immediate lives, that they at least often do seem like something
Mhm.
you can do actionable directly about.
Yeah.
Which is why like all this, we might call like the woke wars in education or
Mhm.
something like that is seems to have such pull. Yeah, a lot of it's appealing to bigotry, no doubt, but it's also appealing to, well, it's something you can act on. You're also giving a narrative
Mhm.
for how it affects someone's life, and it's something they could do something about.
Exactly.
Whereas a lot of the opposition to that is not framed in that at all.
Yep.
Or it's framed in a victimization narrative, which is often like legitimate, but
Mhm.
I think doesn't move people very much.
I agree with you.
Like,
We can't shame people into action. And I think that's our biggest thing. We want to shame people. We want to belittle people. There's a book called, I think it's called What Happened in Kansas or What's Wrong with Kansas. It's a book about this very issue. And it talks about how Kansas used to be a stronghold for Democrats back in the day. Like they had it on lock. They were the party of the worker. They were the people who felt seen by the Democratic Party because it wasn't this whole hierarchy. And it shows how Kansas has increasingly become more and more red over the past few years, or not even few years, few decades, because of the leftist attitude. Like they started calling people latte liberals, and they started having this whole aura of being stuck up and know-it-alls and shame and all of that. And it turned a lot of people who was their base off of them and turned them onto the right, because the right is like, come one, come all, we just here, it was a different type of energy. And I think that's what kind of messes us up, because we assume that people know things that they may or they may not know, or may not have understood on the level that we understand it, but we go in assuming that the worst. Essentially, that's not helpful. And then, like you said, there's no solutions. Okay, like we can shame you to death. We can tell you it's wrong to be racist. I could tell you it's wrong to be sexist. We know that, but like, what are we going to do about it? Yeah, I think the book's called "What's Wrong with Kansas."
yeah, yeah. I think it's What's the Matter with Kansas. I
What's
think
the
it's
matter with Kansas? Thank you,
yeah,
thank
it's
you.
by
Yes,
Tom
yes,
Frank.
yes.
Um,
The latte liberals.
well, it's interesting to me because that framework has been kind of uh, a a weirdly effective tactic for different kinds of right wingers, even
Mm-hmm.
for since the '60s.
Yep.
Um, and I think that's an important thing to think about. I do study the populist era and
Mm-hmm.
the early era of the Democrats, and one thing I will say is some things that did change was like the end of sharecropping and that base of the populist party,
Mm-hmm.
but um, it is interesting to me how um, you get in these kinds of narratives where like let's take something like a current super hot culture war thing where the right seems to make gains on it, even though it doesn't make sense that they're making gains on it because it's not generally speaking popular. So,
Mm-hmm.
oh, a lot of the anti-trans legislation that's going through right now and
Right.
is very bad and in red states and it's going through, um, and yet, from everything that I read, it is not broadly speaking popular, even in the states that it's happening in, except to some degree when you mention children, and there seems to be a lot of misunderstanding about what's going on there.
Yep.
But fighting that seems to be difficult. If you want to make that issue like relevant to someone in, say, a rural district, for a candidate or for almost anything, just an issue advocacy, we can do that too. How would you frame that for discussion? Like, how would you try to, like, would you not talk about it, or would you talk about it but try to direct it in a different way? Like, what would you try to do to make that a motivating factor to a certain kind of, like, let's say, not super religious, but say average religious, purple, reddish state voter?
Yeah, I think I would push the narrative I would use in that is the let's all mind our business narrative. Because one thing that Republican voters don't like is big government. Allegedly, allegedly their big thing is I don't like big government. I don't want these people coming in here and telling me what to do. And I would just ask them to honor that mindset. If you don't want people coming in and telling you what to do, me either. You don't have to agree. Okay. Trans is not contagious. Like, that's what I've been telling people. The gay, you can't catch the gay. So just live your own life and let people live their lives. That would be the way that I would frame that issue, because they try to rally people up, like you said, with calling them groomers and all of that nonsense to make people feel like it affects them somehow. But the truth is that issue does not affect them. So I think pushing the narrative that this does not affect you and what someone decides to do with their life is their own personal business, just like whatever you decide to do with your life is your own personal business. Remember, we don't like big government. Hands off. You don't want me touching your guns. You don't want me touching your stuff. Don't touch people's sexual identities. So that's kind of will be the lane that I paint that in.
Not a problem.
Okay. But yeah, that would be my framing of that.
Okay.
Mind your business is what I would tell them. Respectfully.
I guess this leads to a kind of perpetual question, though, and it's one thing I've asked a lot of far leftists too. It's something I think a lot about. There's a disconnect in polls often when you look at, like, what, say, the average red state voter will authorize on let's say a referendum. I mean, even here in Utah, we've had tons of quote progressive results. I say quote because they end up being rewritten by the legislature in a way that saps them, but they go through all the time. And yet there does not seem to be a faith in progressive candidates. Now, there's a tendency amongst certain members of liberals in the left to then blame the constituency for that. The whole, like, they're not voting in their interest. I tend to find that to be like a spiral problem, because once you start saying that, it's like
you isolating yourself.
Yeah, like, of course you're isolating yourself. Exactly. Like, that's not going to help anybody, and like you sound patronizing, but also
the word.
I think, and you can tell me what you think about this, but I think part of the issue there is a lot of people no longer trust congressional candidates of any variety to be able to deliver positive anything. People might trust them to be able to obstruct things.
Absolutely.
And if there's a place in government where you could actually have any positive effect, regardless of your political affiliations, it does seem to me actually at lower levels.
Absolutely.
Do you find it hard to get people to care about lower levels as kind of a strategy to build up, say, a national campaign? Because I actually do think this is a problem.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And it's something that I try to have conversations with, just honest conversations. But again, it's so much ego in the run, and that's the problem. Like, for instance, I very recently had a candidate who wanted to run against, I won't name drop, a very huge right winger in the Senate. And they wanted to run a U.S. Senate race against this person. So I had a conversation and I was asking, this is somebody who's very progressive on the left. I'm asking their background, like what type of organizing do you do? You know, have you ran for elected office before? And they're like, no, I've never ran before. You know, no, I don't do a whole lot. But like, I need to get rid of such and such because this is really important. And trying to get them to understand that, okay, the issues that you're passionate about have a much better chance, one, getting elected for a higher office in the future, and two, actually being able to cause some sort of positive change on the issue if you run for a city council seat. We're looking at your district. It's some city council seats that are happening right now. And it's a good first shot to see what it's like to actually legislate, to see what it's like to run and win a campaign so that you can eventually build yourself up to a U.S. Senate race, which is the highest race in the land other than the president, which a lot of people don't know. So just trying to have those conversations with people. A lot of them are attached to the title of being whatever instead of getting the issue resolved. So that's absolutely been a huge problem for us, is just trying to get people to understand that, one, as a U.S. senator, it's a big role. You're not going to do a whole lot. Like, you're not going to do a whole lot because, yeah, Congress is broken right now. Realistically, like, it will take so many people that you have to vote your way to even get an inch of a thing done up there. But if you run for this city council seat, you might be able to get a whole lot done. But that's not why people are running a lot of time. It's really just, we've kind of been having this whole internal battle ourselves and just kind of figuring out how can we weed out candidates better and just start having more conversation with people who are running to lead and who are running to govern and who are running to, you know, do something effective. Because a lot of times when we're having these conversations, it's more so geared to, I want to be a senator, than it is, I want to resolve X issue. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that is that's kind of a huge thing. And I think also, if you're going to, this is why I think personal trust is really important. I'll give you an example from outside the United States, and you may not know much about it, but for example, the Workers' Party in Brazil did not do that well in the last election, but their leader Lula really did, and when the presidency was able to kind of fend off a not insignificant coup attempt with popular support. And the popular support is in him, not his party, which is a problem, right? But it's because I think he's seen as being able to deliver on things where other people from the same party have not been. Yeah. Now, I'm not one who encourages like these kinds of personality cults around individual candidates, but I do think it's kind of important to look at. Another example, on paper, someone like Lori Lightfoot seems a lot like Barack Obama. Comes out of law, relatively progressive prosecutor, etc. I don't know a single person in Chicago who was sad to see her go.
Literally.
Right. And what I find interesting about that is that, and I'm not calling all Democrats out here, but I am kind of a little bit, but like, it seems like the lesson that was learned from Barack Obama was that, you know, find someone who's charismatic, who fits the right demographic profile, and who's kind of a cipher, and put them out there. And I'm like, yeah, that's not why. No matter how I feel about Barack Obama's politics, I know that that's not why people supported him. Like, it wasn't just like that he was. I'm not saying being the first Black president isn't important. It's actually pretty vital, but that's not the only reason people were invested in him, even if I don't agree with all of his policy decisions.
Yeah, they thought he would bring change, which is what Democrats are desperately hoping for. And that's why the Republicans in some of these elections do so much better. It's not even why Republicans do so much better. Their base likes them more than the Democratic base likes them, because they feel like no matter how ridiculous or evil I think a lot of their policies are, they do what they say they're going to do. If they say we're getting rid of your rights, they're going to get rid of them. If they say we don't like these books, the books are gone. Like they say they're going to do something and then they do it, and that earns trust and respect. For as the Democrats, we be saying we're going to do stuff, we get elected and then don't do nothing. And then election comes around and then we give them another promise. Oh, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And then everybody get riled up about, yeah, they're going to do X, Y, and Z. And then it come and then they don't do it. So we just kind of seem fraudulent. Okay. It's giving scammer. Okay. And that's the problem. And we're using a lot of, like what you're mentioning, a lot of the Democratic strategy is based in tokenism. A lot of it is, okay. We're going to put a Black female. We're going to get a Native American woman. They're very intentional about the tokenism because they know that it will get some of the base active, but they still aren't big on the delivery part. Like they just want you to get lost in like, oh my God, look how amazing this is. Look what we doing, y'all. And then they kind of just leave it there. And yeah, that's like the biggest difference on why people are just so or just annoyed with the Democratic Party, including its own base.
Yeah. So why do you think? I mean, you actually said why you think that is, but why do you think that Democrats have so much of a problem delivering? What are they? What's the issue there? Like,
this is my tin hat /
right.
just what I know to be true, because I can see this. They are taking money from the same people Republicans are taking money from. It's good cop, bad cop. That's really all it is. Honestly, that's the truth. It's not that they just can't get it done. My hands are just tied. Oh, I wish I could do something. I just can't. Oh, that's what they do say. But if you go to good old Open Secrets, a wonderful website that is free and available to the public, you can type whatever politician name you want to see, and you can see who they're taking money from. And 9 times out of 10, it is the same people that the Republicans are taking money from. So this is all just play and pretend land. Like they're just paid to be the moral good guys. And that's why they go so hard for social issues, but they agree on the economic issues. They never fight hard for economic change or economic opportunity and equity because they're paid not to. So it's easy to just shame you and be like, oh my God, you're anti-trans, you're anti-gay. That's messed up, which is true. But to do anything beyond that would go against what they're paid to do. Y'all cancel me,
y'all. Yeah. That's fair. So I guess, I mean, I think even most far leftists would actually agree with you on that. Mm-hmm. So I guess though the question becomes like, is with that donor problem, how do you overcome that on like local progressive candidates, or how do you like say, what would your strategy be in an ideal world if you had infinite resources? Putting all those caveats on there because I realize that we don't live in that world. To protect, like, say, small Democratic candidates coming up and states to start doing things at the state level where there also may not be as many donors looking.
You would be surprised.
Okay, actually, I was surprised. I'll tell a brief story. I was involved in the nonpartisan city council elections here in the west side of SLC, which is mostly Latin part of town, and some money that was dropped in just this city council election like staggered me to learn. Yeah. I was like, someone's spending several $1 million to run someone on a city council seat in Salt Lake City. Okay. But yeah, so yeah, I realize that that it is kind of a long shot, but I do know, for example, I have a friend who ran for, say, port commissioner in Seattle, which is and in a very red part of not Seattle of Washington, but in a very red part of Washington. And they were progressive, and they won that easy. Yeah. Like, so I find that it is sometimes like, okay, well, how do you kind of build up a coalition of people to at least be somewhat resistant, or to be able to like
Resistant is a good word for it.
yeah.
Yeah, it's all about, and I want us to spend more time on. I don't know how to say this, but there's a flaw in a lot of people who are choosing to run because people get corrupted very cheaply. Like that's the best way I can say it. Like I've seen candidates on city council race and I've looked up their money. CVS only gave them $4,000. That's all it took. Like $4,000. You know what I mean? So I think it really lies in why are you running? And we tell people to have a strong why. And this why has to be the thing that is strong enough to get you to still do what you are elected to do. But a lot of people don't have a real why. It's all, I keep saying ego because I see it so much. A lot of it is about the person. And a person who is running for themselves is going to get corrupted. Like, it just is what it is. Another good strategy would be like the democracy dollars, like they do in Washington, and matching funds like they do in Denver and in New York, to where you have to fundraise locally within your district, and then the state will match that amount, times 8 or whatever. So that way you're getting money from local people and the state itself is amplifying that money. So those candidates, sometimes end up being okay because they, raise their money from their district. A lot of those matching fund programs have maximum. So you're not even allowed to take more than $200 from a local person to get a match in some areas. So sometimes things like that help. I would like to see more programs like that across the country. But it also just goes down to the heart. I know that sounds, silly and corny and stuff, but it's really about having the heart to be running for the right reasons and not be so easily bought. Like Amazon, all these corporations will drop little bitty amounts to them, pennies to them in people's accounts, and people gonna take it. Or like they gonna take it, Some very progressive candidates we work with, we've checked, and it's like, girl, not CBS and such, and then people gonna take the money. And then it's one thing to take the money; it's another thing to let it affect you. Because you could just say, "I'm taking y'all money, and I'm still go legislate and do what I want to do," but a lot of people don't. Because it's easy. Like again, if you're anti-corporation, take CBS little $4,000. I don't have to listen to you. Thank you. Now I won and I took your money, but they're not thinking about it that way. Like they'll let that $4,000 go a long way in their minds.
Interesting. How would you train people against that? I mean, for example, I don't know. It just seems like you could encourage people to realize that the cost to such cheap corruption is that you probably won't be corruptible for long.
That part too, yeah. And I don't know how to get around that conversation. Honestly, it's something that we're literally internally battling with right now, is to how to get people to take not only the race more serious, but the job more serious. Because I feel like a lot of people just kind of run because they think it's a fun project to do, instead of realizing this is an entire career. This is a job you have to do once you get there, and it doesn't end on election day. We want people to start seeing the bigger picture when they're doing stuff, because maybe that'll kind of help them start making better decisions along the way. But a lot of people are kind of short-sighted and not understanding okay, if you want the U.S. Senate race, you're going to become a senator if you win. And that's a big responsibility that's going to require a lot from you. Are you ready for that? And I feel like a lot of people aren't thinking beyond that or the title itself. Instead of thinking oh, what does it mean? What am I going to have to be responsible for? What power do I hold? How will I stay true to myself? How will I stay true to my morals and what got me here? I don't think a lot of people are thinking that deeply about it, which makes me very sad, because I feel like it's such a big responsibility that, people don't take seriously. And that's why we got a government like we got. People just there doing stuff, just hanging out. So, yeah.
So if you were going to advise candidates to pick issues that you think would help them establish a more progressive state base in areas that do not have such representation,
Mhm.
where would you tell them to focus right now?
Economic. Don't even join the social battle. You're going to lose in the red state. Don't even get on it. I would talk about housing because we can all relate. Okay. The cost of living has gone so up, it's not even funny. I would talk about things like food insecurity and broadband access. That's something that's big in these rural areas that people don't even like campaign on. But that's a big issue that can affect everybody. Like, you want to be able to have internet access. Just because you live in the country doesn't mean you don't want to be able to connect with the world. There's like food deserts and things like that. So I would be thinking about economic stuff, better wages, healthcare, because cancer don't have a political affiliation. We could all get stricken with some sort of disease, and our life could be gone in the next minute. Like they say, most people die because due to treatable stuff had they caught it early, but people can't even afford to go to the doctor. So I would just talk about things that actually affect people's lives that don't have a party. Like, we all get sick. We all need to be able to afford to go to the ER. We all need to be able to afford to get our yearly checkups. So I would just stay on those issues that we can agree on and just kind of find the common ground in as many issues as we can and just run on those issues. No need to be divisive. We already divided. We're already very, very divided. So find the common ground issues that affect the most people in your district and come up with solutions for those economic issues.
Do you see any levels of economic issues that would be easy to pull at a state or local level?
Yeah, I feel like the good thing that I've noticed about like the right, they don't like what's the word? They're not like super anti-corporate, but they don't like the feeling of being taken advantage of. Like, nobody likes that. So if we all got on one accord and said these damn housing developers or these real estate developers is coming in here and jacking up the cost of living for you all, I feel like that would be a good place for us all to start, because that's something that is kind of a newer issue that people are really struggling with. I think that and the homelessness issue are kind of go hand in hand. Like, we have such a uptick in homelessness, or because housing costs has gone up so much. So no matter which way they fall on the issue, those are issues that they care about. So it would be a good area to start, I think. Healthcare. Please do something about healthcare, y'all. People struggling for it.
Okay. What kind of healthcare issues? I mean, like, I think the state and local stuff is actually super important, but healthcare is actually the one that's hardest to fix at state and local level. So, like, let me think about how I would phrase this. What would you? How would you say that we could start looking at building coalitions at these smaller levels to like build up something to push something at the national level? Because the one thing I could say right now is, like, when it comes on, say, if you're looking at the Democrats in Congress and say you have 6 to 10 progressives, 30, 40 progressives at most, but you only have like 2 or 3 super conservative Democrats. And I know that's not true, but we're just assuming. But the 2 or 3 super conservative Democrats can jump parties where the progressives can't. So just strategically, it's a harder hill to cross. What kind of strategy would you think would like help with that? Do you think if like building these state level things to throw state houses or whatever back towards the Democrats, would that make that a safer move? So it would be harder, like, because when you're dealing with like a very a Dixiecrat run state like West Virginia, although it's funny that West Virginia ends up being kind of Dixiecrat run given where it was in Civil War. But anyway, and you have someone like Joe Manchin, and you can't really primary him yet, because if you were to do so, the Republican Party is so strong that's going to be a loss, and you'll also lose the Senate. Right? how do you like what kind of long-term strategy would you like suggest to kind of overcome that? Like, would having, a bluer say Texas or Georgia to offset that make that easier, or having actual progressives in even some of those states maybe, as opposed to just whatever the most conservative Democrat you could possibly find?
Yeah.
Like what kind of things would you suggest that people who doing when they think about, okay, I want to do this for my constituency, but I also have this vision long term, because we know that, like, I don't have, if nothing else, my state doesn't have currency sovereignty, so we can't just print money to fund healthcare. How do we, how would one strategize around that?
Yeah, I would say be strategic. No, I think starting locally and find seats that are purple or seats that are becoming vacant or new districts, because there's a lot of redistricting that has occurred, and just being diligent on pursuing winnable seats, because there's a lot of them. There's new districts being created every day. So just being strategic and doing your research and finding out what seats you can win and going after those seats purposely are a really good strategy. I think the strategy that I've encountered a lot is a losing strategy, because a lot of the progressives that we've worked with want to go up against huge right wingers in R+30 districts. We ain't gonna win that, boo. So, we can put up a heck of a race, but at the same time, we have to be able to be realistic and find seats that make the most sense for us. Because at the end of the day, it's just about numbers. It's about having more of us than it is of them. So us putting all of our money and resources into trying to flip a R+15 district just don't make no sense. Like, it would be cool to get rid of this dude that you hate, but realistically, you're not going to do it. You're going to waste a lot of time, energy, support, and funds from people that especially if you're grassroots fundraising, you're going to raise a lot of money from people who probably don't even have it like that, just to go into a losing race. So it's just about choosing races that make the most sense so that your numbers can grow. That actually just occurred to me right now. That was such a good question, because that is something that I've noticed. A lot of people want to run in very red districts sometimes. And I'm like, girl, the neighbor district in this seat over here is open. It is an open seat. We should go get that one. But sometimes people are so focused on, a certain goal instead of the ultimate goal, which is to secure the numbers and win. You will be surprised how many people I hear tell me, I'm not running this race to win. Then I don't know what we're doing. What do you mean? I'm running this race because I got a point to prove. I got a message to send. It's like, that's not what this is about. The Republicans are running to win. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you make of, because I've heard this a lot, actually, particularly from Democratic Socialist and progressive candidates, that they're running for symbolic cachet or something.
That is stupid. And I'm going to be the first person to tell them that. That is dumb. You cannot legislate on a symbol. But yes, stop doing that. This happens a lot. A lot of people, and we'll be in crazy districts, and it's just like, why are we doing this? Because it's not about me winning. It's about me sending this message. It is about you winning. And the minute that you accept that you actually have to have some sort of political power to change something, the better off we'll all be. Because we're winning a losing war when we're running against people who are running to win, and you're running to not win. Because you're already going into the race with a loser mentality, which isn't helpful. You already know you're not going to win, or you already know your goal isn't to win, which means you're going to run a crappy race. And you're just going to waste everybody's time and money. And I feel like if we start putting it into perspective like that, maybe it'll get through to some people. And I'm hoping that that perspective will be helpful. It's like, you want to be a grassroots candidate, right? You don't want to take corporate money. You don't want to take money from the real estate developers, all of that stuff. You want to raise money from the communities that you're running in, which oftentimes is a poor or working class community. So you want all of these people to give you money away from their bills, away from their children, away from food, away from their housing, to give to you in this race, to not even plan on winning. Why would you do that to them? That's just wasting people's money.
Yeah, that's it's absurd. But I have heard it a lot. Sometimes I think it's a way people say it as a way to save face for a failed campaign, but I think even there it's a bad move.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
um,
wrong. Like, dang, this teacher who make $26,000 a year gave you the last $150 she had, and you ain't even gonna try to win. Like, why are
uh,
you doing that?
so I guess I have one more strategy question. Why do you think that there's been no left answer to like school board takeovers? Like, why do you think there hasn't been like? I have actually wondered this too. I live in an area where school
Hmm.
boards are kind of under assault, and yet there's been no attempt to answer it with a narrative and counter candidates,
Hmm.
even in areas because I live in Salt Lake City, whereas yes, Utah is Republican as hell,
Hmm.
but and yes, we now have we just passed they just passed partisan school boards
Hmm.
issue, but like Salt Lake City itself is a pretty progressive friendly city. I mean,
Hmm.
so why is there not like an active counter campaign that
Yeah.
maybe even does some of the same things but about different issues? I mean, like,
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And we have to have, I think there really just needs to be a big come to Jesus moment on the left, because the answer to your question is because those people are all interested in running for higher seats. Because I've had these conversations. I've had conversations with people who want to run for federal seats or statewide seats who have never ran for office before. And we'll pull up the good old Ballotpedia. We'll pull up your elections map and I'll show you there's a seat here open. There's a city council seat that's pretty competitive. There's a county commissioner seat. Here are some other things you can do that we can help you win. The budget is smaller. You can build the capacity to win this seat here, but they really want to run. They want to win those bigger seats. That's just what they want. And I think we have to kind of take that narrative out of their minds and really just have some conversations that's like, you can do a lot with a little. You can be a statewide, even statewide. You got people that don't even want to run for a state seat. They want to run straight for a federal seat. You can be on the school board and help people. You can. You can make sure that people's funds aren't getting allocated away from the public school district. That's something that you can have a hand in. You can have the superintendent's ear. If you don't want, the public education system to crumble, there is a way that you can affect that and it not be to be a US congresswoman or whatever. And I just think we have to have we got to come back down to earth. We got to come back down to earth. I get it. We are the moral higher folks or whatever, but that don't mean you always got to run for the highest seat in the land. Find a seat that can actually achieve something. But yeah, that what you're saying, I've seen that several times where, yeah, girl, go run for this instead. I don't want to. I want to run for this. It's like, okay. But yeah.
yeah, I think that's a that's a very important point, and I think sometimes I think that we not that I totally enshrine using totally dirty tactics, but for example, when social and emotional learning is attacked by conservatives, we need to just be honest. That's included because we have a suicide epidemic.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why do you want to get rid of it so bad? Do
Yeah.
you like, I mean, with the implications being pretty clear about, what we're saying, but it's just
Mm-hmm.
like, if people are going to play completely dirty pool,
Mm-hmm.
um, with grooming and whatnot, and you're just
Yeah.
going to
Let it
take it,
happen. Yeah.
it seems like, even as I know plenty of leftists who no longer believe at all in democratic politics, because of that, because they're just like, they're never going to do anything. They never do. They don't even mount a vigorous counter narrative campaign a lot of the time.
They don't. And I think that's because we got to find a narrative and stick to it. If you ask the progressive their opinion on something, you're going to hear 10 different ways how to get something done. We need to figure it out as a team, okay? The right has CRT. That is their whole thing. It ain't even a word. It's an acronym. And they won so many school board seats with that last year. Was that last year, 2022? Yes, with just CRT. We have to figure out how we're going to talk about these issues. What is the plan? What are we rallying behind? What will the messaging be? And what will the strategy be? Like, we kind of have so many things that we care about in so many different ways, and we kind of need to focus in on something specific. Like, when the right wing was going hard on education, we should have been going hard on education. Like, instead of doing a million other things. I think that's also another reason why we struggle with winning these narrative battles, because there's no clear opinion. Like, what do we think, y'all? I know we think that is bad, but what are we going to do about it? I kind of think it just ends at we all think it's bad, and then that's just kind of it.
So I mean, so one theory we would agree is like, yes, a moral narrative is important, but you got to have a moral narrative which you can deliver, and you have to fight as hard as your enemies do.
Yes.
And that is the thing where I think, at least on the congressional level, I think people, and I realize it's a harder task. I do, like, just strategically speaking, what the center right at least wants to do is already rooted in things that generally exist. So it's an easier argument. Right. But you have to, it can't be all morality and then like, oh shucks, we just can't win this time, over and over and over and over again. Like,
and it's a serious thing, and that's what I want people to know. If people don't walk away with this conversation knowing anything else, know this: we can only repeat this cycle for so long before we stop getting elected, period. People are going to get sick of it. And 2024 is going to be a big year of that. Because we're going to end up giving it right back to Trump or right back to DeSantis, which is even going to be worse because he is got a whole bunch of evil muhaha plans that he wants to do. And we're going to hand it right on over because we can't get anything done. Like, even with the progressives in Congress, bless their soul, but it's a bunch of Twitter fingers. Tweet, tweet, tweet. We send out tweets all day yelling at people. Write a bill. Write a bill. Like, release. Literally, when the last bill they wrote? Tell me. I don't even know. What is the last bill that they have gotten together and drafted and proposed? Tell me, like, two. But they be on Twitter all damn day long. This is them all day. You're a congressperson.
Yeah, I think that's learning the wrong lesson about what narratives mean. Like, you do actually have to eventually deliver on something for the narrative to catch.
On something. Write a bill. I haven't seen a bill since the Green New Deal. That was the last big bill that they came together and did by themselves. It was a damn Green New Deal and Medicare for all. What year was that? 2018? Okay, it's been 5 years. Let's do something else. Let's propose a new one. Come on. That's the problem.
And I think in my sphere, that's where the cynicism comes from, because even on a local level, like you look at someone, not a Democrat, but a pretty far leftist, Kasama Swamp, did a whole lot for her constituency for her first year. Right. And then and she did, give her full props, and and she's never done anything bad for her constituency. I'll also give her that. But like, she hasn't won anything or even proposed much other than just trying to keep her seat
Talk about
since her first term.
Talk about it. Come on.
So like, and it's just like, if you get stuck in that, I mean, and she's leaving now on her own accord, but if you get stuck in that position, it's like, well, I used to argue with some of her supporters, and I'd be like, well, look, I don't have a problem with her politics. She's, she has good positions. I don't have votes on her that it's gonna like be damning, but she hasn't been, and she did a lot her first year, but we have now gone through 2 different election cycles with her, and it's just been all you've been able to do is hold on to the seat. You haven't been able to even expand anyone for her to work with.
Yeah.
That's not an economic, that's not a political policy, and I'm not posing at anything.
Yeah.
Like, so that's the cul-de-sac, and I realize it's a very hard cul-de-sac to get out of. But what I got for when you, I'll admit, I was a little bit skeptical when you first posed. I don't generally talk to people who work directly with politicians, but when you told me what your goal was, which is just getting people understanding, like, well, local power is what you're going to have to build, and you can do that, and you can even do it in areas where, like, there aren't a whole lot of, very strong identified progressives as like a cultural norm. That I want people to understand that it's doable, but if you don't do it, it eventually won't be doable.
Yes.
Like,
Oh my God. Yes. 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 That is where I will scream from the top of my lungs as long as I live. The window is but so wide. You keep fumbling the bag, then other people are just going to walk right into those seats. I have talked to people who races, their win number 400. 400 votes is all you might need for some of these seats, but you would rather enter the race where your win number is 75,000 votes. Why?
Yeah, it just seems like, okay, that just tells me you don't understand how you build power with bases and areas with people, like, not just with ideas over the name. It seems like people got, I'll tell you my thesis for at least the far left, that people got super local in the 70s and 80s. It didn't work in the 90s. And so then they just flipped it and decided, like, everything has to be national all the time. And then there's also just media trends that back that up. But I do think they kind of converge together. And what we've seen now is just like, I almost feel like, Democratic Socialist Quixote a lot of the times, because it's just like, you're tilting at windmills, but we literally don't even have a strategy to protect. Like, let's just see, the progressives mean everything, saying they're not cynical. All right. And that's a big assumption, but I'm going to give it to them because I don't know anyone's heart. And let's just say that, and let's say, but you, like, just from the standpoint of electoral coalition, you can't protect them. The center of the DNC can, where the money is going. You either have to build coalitions in areas that are cheaper but would actually matter for a state election map, or you have to have a ton of money, which, good luck. Like,
look at Texas for an example. I was talking to some organizers from Texas the other day. We have very big blue pockets in Texas, and there is a 2 to 3% gap that we cannot close. And do you know why? Because nobody's spending any time in all of the other little counties trying to get people elected. They just don't even try. And I've talked to groups in those areas where it's like, yeah, we want to run people here. We just haven't ran. No Democrat has ran here in 60 years. Run somebody, because that is the stuff that will turn these deep red counties light red or a hint of blue. And if we can start doing, and then these races are winnable. Do you know some of these counties in Texas? I get so worked. I live in Texas. If I never told y'all that. I live in Texas, everybody. Some of these counties got 100 people in it. Get off your behind and get these little 51 people to like you that it would take to flip this county. If y'all take the time to go into these counties and run people in these counties in these small seats, it is a long game. I feel like people want to run for those big seats because they can get a lot of votes at once, like 75,000 people on my side. But that's not the key to longevity and success in this. It may take you the next 6 years to run people in all of those counties to get enough Texas state House representatives to actually do something positive. But that's going to be 6 years well spent versus you just sitting here and be like, oh, nobody's ran here in 50 years. So I'm just not going to do it. Do it. Tiny win numbers, teeny tiny. It wouldn't even be hard. But they don't even try. Salem, what? Sorry, my cat. But yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I really think this is an important conversation, and I will include any links to what you do in my show notes. Is there anything you'd like to say in closing?
Um, Please, if y'all are hearing this and you are passionate about the issues and you got the grit to do it, run for office, y'all. Don't be scared. And there's no seat too small to run for. Know that. That is my parting words. Run for that seat, whatever it is.
All right. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.